Hello. So this video is going to be a book review of Walter E. Oliu, Charles T. Brusaw, and Gerald J. Alred's Writing That Works, Communicating Effectively on the Job, 13th edition. This is a business writing textbook. In the several years now that I've been teaching business writing here at Penn State, I've used a few different textbooks. Of the ones I've used, this has been my favorite. That being said, it is a business writing textbook, so it's not the most thrilling of reads in the world. One of the things I like about this one, it is published by Bedford St. Martin's. That's a pretty good academic press. And compared to some of the other business writing textbooks, particularly the ones on the approved list here at Penn State, because there's only a certain number of textbooks we can potentially use according to the rules of Penn State. That's a whole other story. But compared to many of the other business writing textbooks, this one is a pretty affordable one, which I appreciate on behalf of my students. It's still not cheap, but it's somewhat more affordable than many of the others. In terms of the actual content, I think it's quite good for the type of projects that I teach. So I teach a sort of informal proposal project in business letter format. I teach professional communications, emails, memos, that sort of thing, delivering routine or positive news, negative news, and persuasive writing. I teach job application documents, resumes, and application letters. I teach a document design project where they're basically doing sort of advertising. And then I teach a formal presentation project. Generally, it's pretty good, especially for the first three projects. The topic approval proposal in the business letter format, the emails and memos, and the job documents. This is pretty good. And it's got good foundational stuff about like the basics of rhetoric, and then how the basics of that rhetoric translates into business writing, professional writing contexts specifically. So particularly if you're in a program like what we have here at Penn State, where students will have taken a university level composition and rhetoric course before they take the business writing course, a lot of what the authors have in Writing That Works will sort of draw on that foundational rhetorical knowledge. So one thing that I like is they have a brief contents, and then they have a more detailed content. So that I think is actually quite useful in terms of if you're an instructor looking to decide on whether to use this textbook, to just sort of get a sense of what's involved in this book and whether it would be a good option for you. So the brief contents breaks it up with the overarching concerns and ideas. So part one is the writing process at work, which consists of 2 chapters on understanding workplace writing, planning, drafting, and revising. Basic foundational stuff, the kind of stuff that you would want to start with typically. Then part 2 deals with methods and design. So this talks about like collaborative writing, doing research, designing different types of documents, and writing online. Then part 3 consists of a number of chapters. Messages and models is the structure. So emails, memos, letters, routine messages, negative messages, informal reports, formal reports, writing instructions, proposals, giving presentations, and finding the right job. And then there's an appendix with a revision guide. There's an index and sample and a list of sample documents. The contents goes through this in more detail. So again, if you're looking for like, okay, what do I want to assign at which point? Do I want to have them read the collaborating with other departments section or something like this? The more detailed table of contents takes you through that stuff. Again, it's standard kind of textbook stuff, but I think it's really, I think it's well set up as a business writing textbook. And then one of the other things I really like is in the back, almost at the back cover, there's this index of sample documents. They have a lot of samples throughout this, a lot of examples. So if you are having your students write memos, they have a sample of memo format, a sample of different headers, an incident report, an internal memo for sensitive topic, an investigative report, meeting minutes, a rejection memo for an internal proposal, a transmittal memo for a formal report. So they've got these different models, and then the page numbers obviously are given there. Within the book itself, there's, again, a lot of these samples that are really, really useful. This is a sample business letter, for instance, and it takes you through the heading for a business letter, what the body of a business letter should look like, what this format should look like, how the signature line should be set up, etc., etc. And I annotated that one to sort of draw additional attention to it. But these are really good models, particularly if for your business writing class, you're going to ask your students to do things like write a business letter, which is what I have my students do for the first project. So they have to have the heading information correct. You start with your address without your name, then the date, then a couple of skipped lines, the recipient's full name and address, etc. All that stuff has to be correct. It's in here. It's laid out, and these are easy to follow models. There are also a number of different models of like resumes, application letters, things like that. Things that are really, really useful as models because, again, resume models, and then on the next page you've got two more. I'm looking oddly over this. Next page you've got a couple more. So again, one of the things that is going to be super, super useful for your students is just being able to follow these models in the book itself and figure out, okay, I like that setup for my resume. I want to take those strategies and things like this. This also, especially like the first time I taught business writing, I did not know what I was doing. I had never taken a business writing class, much less taught one. And fortunately, Penn State does a pretty good job training people the first time that you teach a new rhetoric and writing class. So I wasn't completely making stuff up as I went along. But having these kinds of, all right, here's 5 different models of what a resume might look like, that's really, really useful if you are developing a class, and maybe especially if you're not 100% comfortable with this subject matter. So that's really, really useful as an instructor as well as for students. Some of the other things that I think are really useful about this, we got 2 elements in these pages that I think are really good. One is these writer's checklists. So this is a standard element that the authors include here. And basically, at the end, toward the end of sections, they will offer a writer's checklist, which is basically like, here's some of the key things that you want to make sure you're doing when you're writing X type of document. So this one is for meeting minutes, for instance. But they have other ones. let me see if I can find another one just by sort of flipping through quickly. Judicious use of social media. Here's another one. So they have these checklists where they condense key points and they sort of reflect the main things that you as an author would want to keep in mind when doing this type of task in a professional writing situation. And then at the very end, you've got chapter summaries. Again, this is a standard textbook technique, but it works really, really well to sort of wrap things up. And again, to sort of reiterate main points that people want to keep in mind about this subject matter. The other thing that I noticed, and I don't know that this is necessarily a standard thing, but it does crop up in writing that works a few different times, is that they will actually copy paste text from portions of the textbook into other portions of the textbook where it's relevant again. So, for instance, this is page 407. At the top here, we've got this ethics note about repurposing workplace. I need to read it this way. Repurpose workplace created content freely. And this is kind of I like this one in particular as an example because it is doing what that note is about. This is copy pasted from page 11, which is the first time that this particular note shows up. It's relevant in both places, and in this case, it actually works because it basically says, if your company owns the copyright to a particular piece of information, you should be able to use that without needing any sort of copyright permission, doing citations, things like that. But there are other ethics notes that are not about this. And when those ethics notes are important, the authors have copy pasted them from earlier in the textbook. So on the one hand, you have this sort of repetition of information. On the other hand, this is beneficial because, again, these are important things. And I like the emphasis on ethics in business writing, but also in business more general, because, of course, there are big, big, big concerns about ethics in business. And so the focus on that, I think, is really, really good. So again, Walter T. Oliu, Charles T. Brusaw, Gerald J. Alred's Writing That Works, Communicating Effectively on the Job, 13th edition. It's a business writing textbook. Don't expect the great American novel, but as a business writing textbook for teaching a business or professional writing course, I think it's a good one.